Hello everyone, Invictus here. This video is going to be dedicated to newer players, people that are getting into the game and or are struggling at the game. So today what we'll be doing is an army creation guide. So what we'll do is we'll pick a faction and we'll go over some different way you can make an army work really, and the key things to keep in mind while building an army. So we'll start with Boyai, and then our final build is probably going to be with a nicer faction like Getai perhaps or Suebi. So the first thing we need to do, obviously, when creating an army is set up a melee infantry corps. So with faction with the Oathsorn, I definitely bring at least 3 of them. So let's start with that, and we'll start with Boyai because I think it's a faction that's going to be very good to respect the meta of Rome 2. So we're going to go for some Oathsorn as well as Sword Followers. Now these units absolutely need to be synchronized with other units in order to perform well. So we're going to bring 3 Levy Freemen. These guys are going to be there to soak your charge. We'll bring some cavalry as well. These guys are there also to start your initial engagement. So with the heavy horse, charge in, then reinforce with Oathsorn, pull back your cavalry. We're going to go for a small amount of skirmishers, not too much. So we're actually going to try to stick towards 8 sword maximum. So here we have 5, we could bring 3 more. And that's going to be our back line. 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to cut down on these guys and bring 2 Levy Freemen. So that's going to be a very classic Rome 2 build. I'm going to show you guys how to deploy it, and we'll dive a bit more on the reason why we do it that way. CPU, come on. There we go. I'll show you guys how to deploy that, and I'll share a bit of knowledge about the way to start your engagement and so on and so forth, and then we'll jump on another faction to create a build. I think we're going to go for Getai. I think a lot of people love Getai, and so therefore it's a nice place to start, and also we're going to incorporate our skirmishers in this. So once again, this video is more for newer players really that are trying to get started at the game. I am gaming on a potato right now, so please forgive the graphics. So the way we're going to deploy our troop, I personally like to put my general on the right flank, and the flank I'm going to engage with. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is set up our meat shield. I suggest doing it on the yellow line. Now selecting units and using your arrow at the bottom. We're going to spread them a little. These guys are going to be there to cover our main line. We're going to click twice on each of these units and then create our gap. We're going to back these guys a bit. A serrated formation is always good to lure in some units. It's also going to give you flexibility in the way you decide to take the fights. And then that's going to be our backline. So as you see, it's a lot of stages to that army. It's going to give you a lot of flexibility when deciding where and how to engage. Now this formation, you can use it with any faction really. Like that, these sword followers are going to be there to reinforce your general if he gets in a bit of trouble, and or the other Oathsorn. This unit in the middle is probably going to end up being a late game unit, and a very strong one as a matter of fact, so it's going to be a nice add-on to your army. The way I suggest deploying your cavalry is in between those units right here. And so whenever you're about to engage with your Oathsorn, your heavy horse are going to get the initial charge. Make sure that your heavy horse pull back as soon as possible. And the rest of your cavalry is going to be more in the center. So the initial charge could be blunted by your Levy Freemen, for example. But I would recommend keeping your heavy horses as well. It's a nice extra layer if you want to support your sword followers in this case. Since we only have 2 slingers, what we're going to do is we're going to deploy them way back there. And so they're going to be completely safe, not in danger. Now we have 2 more Levy Freemen. These guys are going to be there for late game. I would either deploy them behind your cavalry there, or in a bit more of an aggressive stance beside your cavalry there. So that's if they're there, what's going to happen is once you charge in with your cavalry and blunt the charge, you can use these guys as a deterrent with their precursors towards the enemy cavalry. So I think that's a fine way to deploy that build. As you see, we have the meat shield there. That's going to cover 1 Oathsworn and 2 Sword Follower. You also have those 2 cavalry units that can come in there and blunt charge if need be. And on the side, before engaging your Oathsworn, absolutely crucial that your heavy horse gets in first. If your Oathsworn is in a bit of a trouble, you're going to want to send in your Axe Warrior and retreat your Oathsworn, always. That's going to be a very meta build, a nice way to deploy it. And now we're going to go over a build that we're actually going to put some thought into with Getai. So the way I personally keep my build registered in my in my load up setup is going to be, I write the tier of the faction, what I deem them to be. So this should be S tier actually, small mistake there. And then each faction as their numbers. So Galatia was the 3rd one I did in the A tier faction, and then the first build with Galatia, second build with Galatia, so on and so forth. So we're gonna jump with Getai. I have an absurd amount of pre-made build with Getai. Let us do that together. Okay, so with Getai, we're gonna want to bring noble swords. I suggest bringing 3 of them, and now the next question is going to be, what do we place in between? Axe Warrior, an amazing unit, very cost effective. The one thing that you need to keep in mind is that you don't want them to be charged head-on. That being said, we're also going to need... Whoops, sorry, not these guys. So with Getai, these guys are actually super cost effective. As you can see, 15 moral extra, 20 armor extra, health extra for just 80 denarii, 100% worth it. We're actually going to bring 3. One to blunt to protect your noble sword, the other 2 to work end with your mercenary axe warrior. Cheap cavalry with Getai, we're going to want to bring 4 of them. These guys, once they get in combat, you got to pull them back ASAP. Now with Getai, you have the option either to spend on expensive heavy bowmen. So the expensive heavy bowmen can be your front line, so that's a cool thing with them. But if you're facing slingers, it's going to be a bit tough to keep them safe. What I would recommend doing is either not going for a lot of them and deploying them a bit in the back of your army, just like we did with the slinger in the previous one. What you can do if you want to spend on better quality is go for Dacian bowmen, and these guys though cannot be in your front line, so they will not be able to trade effectively versus the enemy skirmishers, and therefore you should keep them in reserve as a counter to cavalry, which is what we're going to do with that build. Now the Getai has access to some very good spears. We don't have any precursors. What we do have is going to be a cavalry counter tactics. When using Getai, you have the choice in between the heavy spear or the armored spear. Now the heavy spear have 25 bonus versus large, as the armored spear do not have that, but their stats are going to be better. We'll go more for a cav counter right now, and so therefore we're going to go for heavy spears. We can now afford more money on our infantry. So what we'll end up doing is probably go for 2 more of these. We'll cut there. We need at least 2 bow or archers. So whenever you do a build and you have leftover founds there, you know you're doing a good job. Now what that means is that you can now start choosing some units and make them and replace them for something better. So that being said, we have a strong sword contingent. Now we have the Spear Warriors, which are a good unit as well to protect. We have 3 Spear Horsemen. I think we're going to try to cut down on the Spear yeah, so we'll do something like that. Now we could either actually afford an elite cavalry or noble sword. So the question now is, how do you want to reinforce this army? I would personally be tempted to just bring another noble sword. And that right there is a strong Getai build. Although not fully polished, I think it's a good build. Okay, we'll do something like that. Let us deploy it. So as we see, we have all the tools to take down enemy infantry. We have some tools to damage our cavalry under the form of those units with a counter-cav tactic, as well as those cav units and your bow horsemen, which should be able to cause some damage early game against the enemy cavalry. And these two archers, sorry, which are going to be there to counter cavalry as well. Now our front line is going to have a bunch of precursors, which is also a good deterrent to enemy cavalry. And so, meat shield. Always put your meat shield first. These guys are there to protect your core. Yeah, something like that. This is going to be the main force of our army. Yeah, we're going to put only one actually. One space, and this maneuver I do with the arrows on your keyboard. Back these up a little, create gaps where the enemy can come in and get lost, and then be susceptible to more precursors or better synced charge. Now this build is good because we're gonna have a lot of reinforcement option. So we went for more compact build on this video, and reason being is that this is for newer players, and therefore that should be easier to handle. Once again, deploy your archers in the back, away from the enemy skirmishers. Those elite spears are there for late game, and therefore they're going to be deployed in the back. So once again, you have the choice where to put them. You could also go towards the flank a bit more if you want to support your cavalry. That's probably what we'll end up doing. Yeah, we can do something like that. So as you can see, it's a very similar build than the other one we had. Similar setup. This is a fine way to deploy your army if you're new. And both sides, you're going to have these guys to harass the enemy cavalry. Now, with a build like that, what I would personally recommend doing is whenever you start the battle, since it's not a build that covers a lot of ground, I try to go for the flank of your enemy, as well as doing this maneuver, which rotates your build a little. And while you do that, because your skirmishers are in the back, they're going to stay safe, and your spear warriors are actually going to be the unit eating the javelin in their face, so, arrows, slings, etc. So this maneuver is done by selecting your whole army, left-clicking on it, dragging it, then press CTRL, and you can actually move your line with your mice at that point. The other way to do that is to simply select your whole army, go Control G, which is going to do a locked formation, and then you can simply use your right mouse button to actually set it in the angle you want. Since we have low skirmishers, that's it. I would suggest going more towards the flank of the enemy and try to force the engagement with your noble sword and spear horseman. Hopefully this video was useful to you guys. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, a comment, whatever, just so I know that it's worth my time to do so. And that's going to be it for today. Thank you guys very much for listening, and a lovely weekend.